Hello, everybody. Welcome to our annual CSC 2020. Can everyone hear me okay? Matthew, can you hear me?
Yep, sounding good.
Perfect. So today I have Matthew Roush with me. He will be the moderator on today's session. And this session is titled Beyond SST from a Special Education Perspective. It is designed to be sort of a Beyond SST demo. So if you're one of those agencies or districts that aren't currently using Beyond SST or you're interested in using Beyond SST, this is the perfect session for you. All right, so I'm going to stop my video now and we're going to get started. All right, so Matthew, can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. All right. So my name is Cole Ashwandon, and today I have, like I said, Matthew Roush with me. He's going to be the moderator. At the end of today's session, he will be answering some questions that come through the Q&A. We have a lot of exciting new features to show you on Beyond SST. So let's go ahead and get started. So since this is a virtual session, it's a little different, obviously, than we normally do our conferences. We have a large number of attendees in each session, so we won't be able to answer questions real time during the virtual sessions. If you can, at the very bottom of your Zoom, there is a Q&A section. All the questions that you put into the Q&A will actually be tallied, and at the very end of all the sessions in the conference, we'll be emailing those to all the attendees. Also, at the very end of the session, if we have time, the moderator, Matthew Roush, will be answering a couple of those at random, just so we kind of get at least some of the questions answered. All the sessions are being recorded, and we will post the videos to the conference website after the conference is over. Also, last but not least, any questions you do have that you don't feel comfortable putting in Q&A maybe, or just something that's more detailed, you could send to sstsupport@sjcoe.net. So I want to talk a little bit about the developers of the system now. The department is called CodeStack. We are a technology department within the San Joaquin County Office of Education. You might have known of us as Cedar. We used to be called Cedar. We recently had a name change to CodeStack, but same great products, same great services that we offer to our people. We do provide services to over 5,000 school districts and public education agencies alike, and that equates to more than 3 million users. So at any time, there could be a large number of users on any of our systems, such as SACE, EdJoin, Promise, Beyond SST. We have about probably 60 or 70 different projects that we work on. Not only these websites, but we also do a lot of stuff for the state, for CDE, and other agencies as well. So real quick, how Beyond SST got started. We were approached by a SELPA director, and that SELPA director said they were spending millions of dollars to assess students for special education services. Many of those who never should have been referred for an assessment in the first place. So in 2009, we created what was called SST Online, and now that has turned into Beyond SST. The reason we call it Beyond SST now is because it doesn't just do SSTs, it also does 504s as well. And I'll kind of touch on that a little bit during the session. Now, after that district or that SELPA was using Beyond SST, they saw a 24% drop in special education referrals after using the system successfully. And I'll kind of talk about some of those numbers a little bit later on here. We have other districts that have the same similar numbers, and they've reported it over several years. So you'll kind of get to see how the system really works if your district or agency is utilizing it correctly. So Beyond SST in a nutshell, Beyond SST, much like all the other systems that we have, SACE, EdJoin, it is a web-based student information system. It's used to track SST interventions, the progress of those interventions, as well as 504s. So the nice thing about doing the 504s is we also have the TOMS report in the system, so you can do all your 504 testing right there. Beyond SST helps create a consistent process for tracking those SSTs and 504s. You might be doing SSTs and 504s right now in your district, but how are you actually tracking them? And is there a consistent process? Since BeyondSST has direct communication with SACE, it provides a systemized approach to legitimate special education referrals. So all these are things that I'll be touching on throughout the session today. So let's ask some questions. What happens when a person asks for a special education assessment in your district? These are kind of some things to be thinking about during the session today. Now, starting with an SST in a less restrictive environment, in BeyondSST, for example, helps address some of the child's needs in general education instead of just having that referral to special education where usually a very large number of those referrals get rejected or they do not qualify for special education services. Does your district or agency have a formal process for conducting SSTs? You know, early interventions and SSTs are being done, kind of like I just said, but where is that data to support it? BeyondSST tracks all that data and it keeps it in that one centralized location. How do you know if those interventions are put into action? How are you tracking the progress of those interventions? So all of these are things that BeyondSST can answer. Do you have students that are being referred to special education that do not qualify? Legitimate referrals give special education team more time to focus on those special education students. So by going through the process in BeyondSST first and possibly identifying some of those issues in general education, it kind of prevents a lot of those students from even needing to be referred to special education, thus giving the special education team more time to spend with those special ed students. Also, it's more attention and resources for the students in general education. Using BeyondSST helps eliminate those unnecessary referrals to special education. That's probably the most important thing about the system is it's going to eliminate a lot of those referrals and it's going to save your district thousands of dollars. In some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout the year, depending on how many referrals you have. So let's talk about some of those numbers, those dollars and cents. The average cost to assess a student, and a lot of you probably already know these numbers, is $2,500 for the independent education evaluation. And that doesn't even include the psychologist time to draft the report, participate in any meetings for the initial IEP, the triennial, etc. The teacher's time to assess, draft the reports, participate in the meetings, and any need for additional staff to support the student. So that $2,500 can easily turn into an actual number of $3,500 or $4,000 per assessment. Now, why should you try interventions in BeyondSST first? One is not every student with a disability needs an IEP. A lot of districts have a lot of referrals, but that's only because they don't have that process in place to keep those students from just getting referred to special education because that's the only out. Not every student who's struggling will qualify for an IEP. Those interventions done in BeyondSST support a referral to special education and or 504 when necessary. So by tracking all that data in BeyondSST, you know, this is what we've done for the student in BeyondSST and general education. This is what supports that student needing that potential special education referral or a 504. Now you're probably asking, does it actually work? When effectively using BeyondSST, you might see results similar to Visalia Unified. So in these two graphics here, one of them is from 2016-2017 school year. The one on the right is from the 2017-2018 school year. Now, if you notice on the left, they had 566 students assessed for special education. On the right, which was the next school year, they had 407 students assessed for special education. So the number of eligible students in special education actually went down, and the number of does not qualifies went down. So it's a total reduction in the assessment. So they saw a 22% decline in assessments to special education and a 45% decline in does not qualify outcomes. So that's huge. If you figure, if you're assessing 100 students or even 10 students, if you can keep from assessing just 2 of those, you're saving you know, $8,000-$10,000 just on those 2 students alone. Long-term reduction. So this is a graphic showing 4 years. And if you look here in blue, it shows the total students who are eligible for special education. And if you look at that blue, it actually starts to reduce. As they were using the system more effectively, you could see the more special education referrals went down, but the number of SST students that were found eligible went up because they were effectively using BeyondSST to track a lot of that information. So now I want to talk about the system itself, a little bit about the status flow, the student status flow in the system. So when a student comes into BeyondSST, they're in a state of what we call a pre-SST, and that's also known as the watching phase. So that's where you're kind of keeping an eye on the student to see if the student needs a formal SST, and then you can refer them for a formal SST if necessary. So that's when the student would become an SST in progress student. You could do the intervention plan, schedule those progress monitorings, intervention plan review at the follow-up meeting, or you could choose to exit the student from BeyondSST if you've determined, hey, we've watched the student enough, we don't think they need that formal SST, we can actually exit them. Now, in the event that you did refer them to a formal SST, I want to show you in the system in a minute here how a lot of those forms work and how you can easily refer the student on to a 504 if necessary, or even to special education. So let's take a look at the system live here. I'm going to jump over to BeyondSST. Now, Matthew, can you see my BeyondSST screen now?
I'm still seeing your presentation right now.
Okay, bear with me for 1 second here. All right, how does that look?
There we go.
Perfect. So I'm on the actual site now, and you'll notice it's just a simple website. The nice thing about all of our systems is they're web-based. You can access our systems from anywhere that you have an internet connection over the internet. And the nice thing about that is all the data is stored in one centralized location on our secure servers. The data is not stored on a local device or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about the data getting into the wrong hands. We do have a very high level of security. I believe it's still 128-bit encryption, just like the US military carries on all of our websites. But real quick here, this is our landing page. You'll see different things come across this landing page. These are known as news items. I'm going to go ahead and log in real quick here. All right, so now I'm logged in, and this is what your dashboard, if you will, or your home screen will look like in BeyondSST. So if you look here, here's some announcements that you can actually place on the news on the home screen for your teachers or for your coordinators to actually look at. Down here, you have your main dashboard section where it shows all the requests coming in from teachers, the transfers, upcoming meetings, different referrals to special education or 504. And across the very top here, we have our main navigation bar. So the main navigation bar gives you access to things like students, different searches and libraries, running reports, our help center, and administration. So I'm just going to go through a few of these things briefly here, just so you could kind of see what they are. The first one here is administration. We have what's called manage users. So in here, as an administrator, you're able to add new users. You're able to simply edit users by clicking on the little person icon next to their name. And by doing that, it would allow you to maybe change their email address or change the organization or school that they're with, or potentially add or remove permissions from their account. Maybe the person left your district. You can actually delete their account if you have permissions to do so by clicking on the little circle with the line through it. So manage users is just a place for you to set up new user accounts. You know, a new teacher comes to your site, something like that. Now, most of the time, adding students would go through what's called a request from a teacher. And requests from teachers actually is done on the teacher's home screen currently. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our API in a minute here. Currently, the teacher would submit a request, and that request would show up right here on the administrator's home screen. So on the administrator's home screen, they go into students to be added, and they see right here, there's a brand new student that we need to add. You can click on the plus sign, put in all the demographic information for the child, and click add. And it says, are you going to approve? Yes. So just like that, I added that student to the system. Immediately, that teacher can start working with those child's records. So that's how the system currently works with adding students. Going forward, our API has been developed, and there are a couple key districts that are using it right now to make sure everything's working properly. But going forward, what will happen is there will actually be a screen that the teacher sees, and it shows a list of all the eligible SST and potentially 504 students. And they can easily click on a link, and that will add the student to their list immediately. So no longer do they have to submit that request and potentially wait days. We've even seen weeks before students get added to a teacher's caseload. So this new API is going to streamline a lot of stuff. It doesn't take away the permissions of, the administrators approving students or not, because those students wouldn't even have shown up on that list if someone hadn't checked a box that said, make them eligible for an SST or a 504. So we're really excited about that API. Towards the end of the day today, I believe at 3:30, we have a what's new and what's next session. If you really want to see a little bit more about that API, please join that session and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, getting into the student record, I'm going to go into that student that I just added here. Let's see, strong boy. You'll see a list of forms here. So this list of forms is very complete. We're constantly adding new stuff to keep them compliant. So the first one you see is the pre-SST interventions. This would be used for in that watching phase when you're doing those pre-SST interventions to see if you think the student needs a formal SST. Now I'm going to go into it real quick just so I could show you it at a glance. You'll see here at the top, general things that you're doing for the student. Maybe there's a parent conference, a counseling referral, or a student conference. If I scroll farther down, there's specific needs such as environmental accommodations, curricular accommodations, modified assignments. And then at the very bottom, once you've gone through the entire watching phase, now that can be different for every single school or potentially every single district. It could be 8 weeks, it could be 2 weeks, depending on how your district likes to keep an eye on children. But basically, you put the date the interventions or strategies were reviewed by the team, and then you put the outcome of those interventions or strategies. Do you think an SST is warranted, or do you think there's no SST needed? So I'm going to say SST needed. The next thing we're going to do is fill out the SST referral. So I'm going to save the form. And the SST referral would actually come next. This would allow you to fill out the reasons why you think the student or why the team thinks the student needs an SST referral. So what are the student's interests and strengths? Students' assets and strengths include supportive adult guardian at home, stands up to peer pressure. Maybe they're creative. Maybe they're good at science or sports, or there's got to be something that you can find that is one of the student's assets and strengths. So imagine you're sitting around sitting in a circle at a meeting with the parents there. You're going through this form with the parents and you're saying, well, these are the things the student's good at. Down here, these are the things that we have concerns about. Maybe the student is above grade level standards, or meeting grade level standards, or below grade level standards. So there's a number of things here, such as written expression, mathematics, that you might have a concern with. And like I said, the forms are very detailed. Obviously, I can't go through every single form and every single field on the form during this demo, but if you would like a demo account to kind of really get in there and see what we have to offer, again, you can email us at sstsupport@sjcoe.net, and I will be putting that email address up later in the session as well, just so you can get an idea. All right, so let's get into a couple of these other forms here. Just going to point out a few more before I show you what the 504 forms look like. We have our progress monitoring form. So progress monitoring, actually, sorry, I just showed you a bad example. Let me go into a different form here. Pre-SST interventions, where is it at? The intervention plan form. So on the intervention plan form, you can actually put the interventions that you're wanting to try with a student. Now, this is assuming the student is now on that formal SST. Maybe you want to give the student 10 extra minutes on math tests. Whatever the situation is, you can put those interventions in here. I'm going to save it. Bear with me here. Now I want to go into progress monitoring. Let's pretend it's now 2 weeks later. You can monitor progress every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, however you like to do it. You can click add record and you can actually document how the student is doing along, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It keeps a documented tally of exactly how that student is doing. The last form I want to show you is the intervention plan review. And this one is typically used at the follow-up meeting. So after the student's been on an SST for 30 days, 60 days, what have you, this is where the team comes back together and says how the student is doing. Did the student meet the goals? Did the student exceed the goals? Maybe they showed only minor progress. The outcome did not differ significantly from the baseline. So based on what you put here is going to determine what happens next. So down here we have success of intervention, and you could choose the intervention was successful, plans no longer needed, or maybe you need to refer them to an SST, or maybe some other situation came up and you need to refer them to a 504. That's where you can document exactly what you're doing. All right, now let's pretend, just for the sake of today's demo, that we had a student that needed a 504. So I'm going to go to a 504 child here. Here's my 504 in progress child. And as you can see here, we have a list of 504 forms now. So now that we've determined the student is a 504 in progress child, it's going to show you a totally different set of forms. So the first thing you'll see is meeting intervention and notice, parent permission, eligibility documentation. I really like this form because, like I said, all the forms are really detailed. We get a lot of input from districts that are using BeyondSST, districts that help us develop the system. And with the 504 forms, we also get input from OCR. So the forms are OCR compliant. They periodically review the forms to make sure that we have everything we need in there. For example, down here, you'll actually see evaluation information. And you'll see the 3 questions that you need to ask to determine if the student is eligible for a 504 or not. Does the student have a mental or physical impairment? Yes or no? If yes, what are they? Does the mental or physical impairment limit a major life activity? Yes or no? What are they? Lastly, is or are the major life activities limited to a substantial degree? So as you can see here, this form kind of cut and dry. This is why the student's eligible for a 504. And like I said, these forms are constantly reviewed by OCR to make sure we're in compliance. Now there's a lot of other 504 forms. I'm not going to go through them right now, but one thing I do want to show you is what a referral to SACE would look like. So let's pretend we had a student. I'm going to go back to my student list here. Let's pretend we had a student that was on an SST. So here we have Bob Barker. He was on SST in progress. Now we've determined this student needs a special education referral. We've done everything we can for this student in general education. There's not much more we can do. Let's try a special education referral. So here we have refer for assessment. And all I do is I choose special education SACE from the dropdown. It actually defaults to that, but just make sure the SACE is in there. And then just put a short comment about why you're referring the student, or, hey, I think this student needs a SPED referral. Click on refer. And what would happen is BeyondSST actually talks to SACE. So I'm going to go into SACE real quick to show you what the other end of this looks like. So now we had our student that we referred from BeyondSST over to SACE. And now the SACE folks are going to get that referral on their home screen right here under SACE integration, BeyondSST consider for assessment. And you'll see this is a different student I did earlier today, but it's going to show the same outcome. You'll see here, there's a little PDF icon. I can actually view the SST right here if I want to. So it allows me to kind of see what was done for the child in general education. So maybe you look at this and you see, well, they only did interventions for 2 weeks. I'm not going to do a special education assessment after they only did it for 2 weeks. At that point, you can actually message them back and say, hey, you need to try more interventions in general ed or what have you. And I'll show you where you can do that in a second. But let's say you do add this student to SACE for an assessment. You click on the little person and choose a case manager here and click add student. And now that student has been added, you can actually edit that student. And this is kind of a new feature that we've added recently. Where is it at here? I got to scroll down a little bit, bear with me. I'm not seeing it. So right here in SACE under notes and attachments, it now keeps a PDF log of that referral that came in from BeyondSST. So like I showed you earlier, at any time, now that this is in the student's history in SACE, at any time you can come in here to see what was done for that child in BeyondSST. So like I said, there is that little piece of integration between BeyondSST and SACE. We're constantly working to improve that integration because the normal path is for the student to start on an SST and then go into SACE. So it only makes sense that that integration works perfectly. All right. So let me get back here. I'm going to stop my share. Give me 1 second here and go back to my PowerPoint. All right, so just to recap, BeyondSST has centralized data that allows for easy access to SSTs and 504s. Like I said, from any computer that has access to the internet, the data is stored in a secure location, not on local devices. Real-time communication with SACE, just like I just showed you, in the event of that special education referral. And it provides a systemized approach for those legitimate SPED referrals. That's the whole process that I was talking about, where you start in BeyondSST and you do all this work in SST, doing interventions, tracking the progress of those interventions. And that's kind of your proof of why you think that student needs a legitimate special education referral. One consistent set of SST forms, 504 forms per student, allows data to be shared locally between BeyondSST, potentially transferred onto other districts because it tracks all that information in history. And then lastly, I mentioned this earlier, the 504 forms are reviewed by the Office of Civil Rights, giving your district a more legally defensive set of 504 forms. Recently, we have noticed a large number of 504 issues that have come up from districts, and a lot of them, just by switching to BeyondSST, has helped alleviate a lot of those legal issues. So I want to talk about a couple new and coming attractions. One of them is, these are things that are available right now. We do have the Spanish SST and the 504 forms. Those forms are available as a read copy. So as you're working on the form, you can actually switch them to Spanish and you can work on them in Spanish. That's perfect for when maybe you're sitting around a table with the parents and they're Spanish speaking parents. You can actually be viewing the form in Spanish. So it not only lets you view the form in Spanish, but it lets you print the form in Spanish. We do have an API for a smooth integration from your student information system to BeyondSST. It also provides a better process for adding students to the system. And like I said earlier, the main reason we're adding this, or we've added this API, is integration is a thing of the future. We want to save your teachers as much time as possible because a lot of that data is already tracked in the student information system. So there's no reason to put that data in twice. So by pulling a lot of that information into BeyondSST, making it readily available, just gives the teachers more time to actually work with the students in the classroom. Couple new features coming soon. We do have a new and improved user interface. We're starting with the teacher side first, and then we will be making changes to the admin side. We're also adding e-signatures to comply with the COVID-19 requirements. So the first thing we'll be putting those on are the 504 forms. They're actually very close to being finalized right now. So hopefully we will make those live soon. Once the 504 forms are released, then we're going to start working on e-signatures for the SST forms. You're probably asking, what is the cost to use BeyondSST? So if you compare us to a lot of our competitors, we're actually a lot cheaper than them. Our first year one-time setup fee is $2,500 minimum or 25% of your annual fee. So all the fees in BeyondSST are based off of your SPED's ADA count. So your most recent SPED's ADA. So basically, let's say your ADA is 10,000, your setup fee would be 2,500. If your ADA was 11,000, it would be 25% of that. The setup fee covers implementation planning, data loads, such as getting all your getting your data into the system, and then also startup trainings. Currently, we're doing those startup trainings virtually, obviously, because we can't come and meet in person due to COVID-19, but we are still supporting the new users and all the users that are out there. Annual cost is $1 per student based on your SPED's ADA with a minimum cost of $2,500. So if you have 10,000 students in your district, the cost to use BeyondSST would be $10,000. Now we do offer discounts to people that are already using SACE. I believe currently that is a 25% discount for SACE users. Also, if your entire SELPA decides to come on to BeyondSST, we offer a discount for that as well. We've come to the question and answer section. So again, due to the number of attendees, I can't answer questions live, but Matthew Roush here will actually pick a couple questions at random, and he'll answer. He'll state what the question was, and then he'll answer the question. So Matthew.
And thank you, Cole. And yeah, great presentation, great information. Thank you. And yeah, I've kind of been following the question and answer as you've been discussing. So I've answered quite a few already. Just some things about some starting the contract, things like that. But a couple of general questions. Oh, this is actually a good question. And we've mentioned this before. An update on the electronic signatures. I know that we are working on that at CodeStack. I know it's been implemented for SACE already. We are actively working on it for BeyondSST right now. I can't give you a definite date. Cole, do you have any further information from the developers on the electronic signature?
I don't, but I think a safe date would be to say by mid-January, we would have that live, at least for the 504 forms. We're working to get that out as soon as possible. And like I said earlier, it actually is in the final stages of development, but we still have to do all the testing and make sure everything's working properly before we just release it out to the public.
Yeah, that one does need to be tested extensively. Obviously, we're dealing with legal signatures and data, so we want to make sure that all that gets sent securely and correctly. So thank you for that. So yeah, look for that. Cole mentioned our news page. So that's something we will post up on that news page. So make sure you, before you log into BeyondSST, always pause for a moment on that news page just to see if there are any notifications like that that we've sent out. Someone else asked, are there examples of possible answers that would go into each form? We, and Cole will speak to this also, on our end, we're more of the tech guys. We're the technology guys that kind of create the programs. We work with a lot of schools and communicate a lot back and forth with the schools and the districts. But as far as what would go into the forms, that's really more of a the curriculum or education type answer rather than a technical answer. Does that make sense, Cole? Do you want to speak more to that?
Yeah, that's correct. Typically, those questions are addressed at the district level. And once people start using a system like BeyondSST, they would probably hold either monthly or even quarterly meetings to discuss some of those things that might come up. So I would address those with your district.
Does SACE use the referral dates and source generated from SST forms? I know the forms themselves are available in SACE. I don't believe any specific fields within SACE are populated. Is that correct, Cole? It just copies over the PDFs to make them available for the special education evaluator?
Currently, that is correct, but like I mentioned earlier, we're constantly improving that integration piece between BeyondSST and SACE. Obviously, since we manage both of those systems, there's a lot more we can do with it. So pulling that data from BeyondSST as a PDF is currently the way it's being done, but in the future, I do see it going in the direction of a lot of those fields that are already in BeyondSST will populate fields in SACE. So that's not ready now, and I don't see any timeline as to when that will be available, but that is the direction we're moving.
Yeah, we do want to more closely integrate some of those systems like BeyondSST and SACE really go hand in hand. So we are working on more closely integrating that. But like Cole said, those things take some time. So again, we'll let you know as we progress through that integration. Are SST forms customizable? They're not really customizable per se in that where you can change the fields or change the checkboxes around, but what is customizable is how you use the forms that are available. A lot of districts, they don't use the entire form. Let's say, for example, the pre-SST intervention form. Some districts only like to use certain sections of that form. They don't really care about the other sections. So in that way, the process itself is customizable, but not the forms themselves. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Do we do presentations for districts individually? Absolutely, yes. Cole mentioned this at the beginning. I put the email address in chat, but I'll repeat it here again. The email address, sstsupport@sjcoe.net. You can send an email and we will set up a more or less like the demo that Cole gave today, except it'll be live with just you guys, just your district folks. Maybe 5 or 6 of the administrators want to see the presentation. So we'll give that presentation to you. You'll have plenty of time to ask questions. So yes, we will give these to you, these presentations, these demos. We can do that directly for you on your own time. So again, email us at sstsupport@sjcoe.net and we'll set that up for you. So let me see, and Cole, jump in here. I'm just kind of going through some of the Q&A questions. With these forms, how long does an SST meeting normally last? One thing that we try to present is that we don't want to necessarily change the process you have already in place. Now, some of you, may want to improve your process or streamline it. But whatever you're doing right now for your SST and 504 meetings, we want you to kind of continue doing that, but to use BeyondSST to track that information. So, again, before you would have these meetings and someone would take some notes on paper and someone would write down some interventions. But now all that's going to be the same, except you'll just enter that all electronically. And that way, all the team has access to it. Like Cole said, it's available online at any time. So again, the meetings themselves don't really change by using BeyondSST. It's just how you record the information for those meetings that is the big change.
Perfect. Thank you, Matthew. Oh, did you have some more you wanted to answer?
There's a couple more here. In fact, it got quite a few good questions. And yeah, jump in here anytime you have more information, Cole. I'm just kind of going through them. Can we do just 504s versus also adding SSTs? We really don't sell the 504 package separately. It kind of comes with BeyondSST, but if you want more information on that, definitely email us at that SST support email address and maybe give us some more detail as to exactly what you're looking for there. Now, here's kind of a longer question. So for students that have already been placed on an IEP, but are now going through the student attendance review team process, is it okay to reactivate their profiles on BeyondSST and have their status remain referral process so that there's somewhere to keep those meeting notes? Should be noticed that their attendance issues are not due to their disability. Yes, that is okay. You can keep their account, so to speak, open in BeyondSST, and you can record other information there. Now, again, if your student attendance review team requires certain data that's not in BeyondSST, obviously that'll have to be recorded somewhere else. But yes, you can keep these students active on BeyondSST and use those forms to take meeting notes, etc.
Matthew, I do see a good question here. This question is, if a parent makes a request to have their child tested for special education, should the school then start at the BeyondSST level, or must they go directly to a special education referral? I can't answer as to the legality of, yes, you have to go into a special education referral, but what I can tell you is what we've heard from other districts is they set up a process where they suggest putting the student into BeyondSST first, because like I mentioned at the very beginning, that's a less restrictive environment. By doing that, it allows you to see if that student actually needs a special education referral and document a lot of those interventions first. So again, I can't answer to the fact of whether or not you have to, but there are things you can do as a district that kind of suggest maybe going into an SST first. And if the parent's okay with that, then you can move into SST.
Cool, thank you. Let's see, a couple more questions here. I think we've got a few more minutes left, don't we? 11:20 is the cutoff, correct? Yeah, so let me see. Pat Gales. Hey, Pat, I've spoken with you several times on the help desk. How you doing? Pat's asking, are you going to adjust the accommodations for distance learning? Pat, that is a really good question. Cole, have we discussed any of that? Because yes, some of these accommodations are a little bit different now, now that everybody's kind of doing their learning at home.
We haven't discussed it yet, but I do foresee that happening. Other systems that I work on have already made adjustments for those. I do a lot of work on the DRDP system, and we've already made changes for modified assessments, things of that nature. So I do see that happening in the future. We'll just have to get with the right people to figure out exactly what accommodations we'll need to put in there for distance learning.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And actually, Pat, if you could send an email to the support desk, let us know some of the adjustments that you guys are having to make, or what new or modified accommodations you might like to see. Give us a list of some of those and we'll take a look. We can't promise anything right now, but we can certainly take a look at it. And like I said, like Cole said, everybody's going to have to make some adjustments for this distance learning thing. So yeah, we'll definitely take a look at your suggestions, Pat. Thank you.
All right.
One question here about attachments. This has been a little bit confusing for some users. So there are really two places in BeyondSST, or there used to be two places in BeyondSST where you could do attachments. There was more of a general kind of attachments documents bin where general attachments would go. And then there was a place to attach documents directly on the forms page themselves. So the attachments would actually affirm with the forms. We have done away with the first attach section where we don't do general attachments anymore. So all attachments are now done on that student's forms page. So it doesn't sound like you're doing something wrong, but you need to look in the student history after you affirm. The attachments will be in the student history, not on the attachments page. So check that student history page. And if you're having issues with affirming 504s, we can definitely contact you. If you can send some details to that support email address, I will definitely take a look at any issues you're having with those 504s.
All right, so I think we'll move on from here. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, all Q&A questions will be answered and sent to all attendees. So I know we answered a lot of those in person, but we will be answering them and sending out an actual document to everyone that attended today's session. Again, if you have any other questions, you can email them to sstsupport@sjcoe.net. All right, I want to thank everyone for attending this session. Like I said, we have a lot of new exciting features to let you know about in today's session at 3:30. So if you want to come to the what's new, what's next, make sure you get registered for that. And I look forward to having everyone in there. But have a good day.